Everyone thinks the story ends when you escape. When the hero rescues the damsel in distress and they ride off into the sunset. Or when the good guys beat the bad guys and the credits roll. But the truth is that is when the work actually starts. That couple still has to build a life together, have kids in the whole 9 yards. The good guys still have to find overall resolution to whatever situation they were in. The same situation applies to you, and the same situation applied to me. Yeah, I had gotten on that bus, and yeah, I had made it to Colorado, but I was just barely getting started. I was still stuck way down deep in that pit that I had started in. So if you've ever looked like you were doing better on the outside, but were still breaking on the inside, when all that work still needed to be done, then this episode is for you. And drop a comment if you've ever faked being okay just to survive, just to convince people. And don't forget to follow so you don't miss the next part. So in the last couple episodes, I told the story about how I wandered through Spokane, begging for donuts at a bakery and wearing flip-flops and carrying everything I owned in a backpack, and then jumping on that bus that I barely got on. But that was just the escape. I thought I had escaped. I really did. But the thing that nobody tells you is that sometimes survival can be a trap too. Just when you get comfortable and just when you get quiet, those lies start to catch up with you. They follow you regardless of where you go. You still have wreckage in your past and you still haven't fixed it yet. And they don't know any geographical boundaries. They follow you across state lines regardless of how many miles you go. Now I had arrived in Colorado, and that was just as jarring of an experience. My brother picked me up at the bus station, handed me a bag of clothes and said, "You look and smell like shit. Go in the bathroom and get yourself cleaned up before I take you home." So I did. There I was in some clothes that barely fit because they were my brother, were twins, but were not quite exactly the same size, and they were his style and not mine. But there I was. I was safe, and I was out of Spokane. I was out of that acute danger. Maybe the bleeding had stopped. But that's when the withdrawals began. I don't know how many of you have ever experienced coming down off of methamphetamines. It's not the vomiting and all the crazy stuff that happens with heroin when you're coming off of that. With methamphetamine, it's more like you want to just sleep because you've been up for days and your energy and adrenaline has been spiked for a very long period of time. So that's what I did basically for the first couple of days, is I just slept. And my brother let me sleep some, but he still was poking me and making sure that I was okay. During those first few days, it was like learning how to live again. I was sleeping inside. I was sleeping in the same place every night for multiple nights in a row. I had access to a shower. I had access to food. I had access to clean clothes. But I also had access to all the nightmares that I had been holding at bay by not allowing myself to sleep. And those nightmares got very real some nights. Some of you have probably experienced those just as bad as I have. I spent a lot of time just pretending that I was okay. And I was okay. Like I wasn't going to die. But trying to live normal again was just as difficult as just about anything else. My brother didn't understand. I didn't even understand what it looked like. This is the first time I've really ever come down off of drugs. This is my first time trying to escape the pig pen of the prodigal son. I knew that I needed to kick the hard drugs, but I still allowed myself an occasional beer, and unbeknownst to my brother, I still snuck some marijuana every once in a while. The first time this happened was in the first few days of me being in Colorado. My brother drugged me around everywhere he went because, his wife didn't necessarily feel comfortable around me and around their kid and stuff like that. So whenever he was gone, I was gone. That was just one of the rules. And so he took me to this business meeting that he was part of, and he was giving a presentation, and I was supposed to just sit outside and maybe take a walk or read a book. So I pulled out my phone, and I Googled the closest weed shop. And I knew I had about an hour and a half before my brother would be done with his presentation. So I was like, oh, there's a coffee shop around the corner. And then just down the street, there's a weed shop. So I walked about a mile, maybe a mile and a half, took the last few bucks that I still had in my pocket, and I walked into this weed shop and I bought myself some edibles. Then I went back and hung out at the coffee shop until my brother was ready to go. And I walked back and I met him. And that night, without anyone knowing, because I was still trying to be sneaky, without anyone knowing, I ate about half of one of those edibles. And I don't know if you know anything about edibles. Most of you probably do if you're watching this. But they take a little while to hit. And they kind of give you this calm, mellow feeling. And that's what it did for me, partially. But what it also did is it triggered all those same responses. Now that I had had methamphetamines in my system, now that I had done those kind of drugs, me jumping back into marijuana triggered those same emotional sensations and physical sensations of what it was like to be high. So I still didn't know what it meant to actually be clean. My nights were again filled with dreams of my children. My nights were filled with dreams about my ex-wife and compulsive thoughts. I'd just wake up in the middle of the night and I'd have to get out of the house and I'd have to go stand in the backyard in the moonlight. I would just stand there, stare off into space, just trying to process all of the craziness of not just the last week, but the last several years of my life. It was also early on that I found a Celebrate Recovery group. And I don't know if you know anything about Celebrate Recovery, but Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered version of Narcotics Anonymous. And they don't just deal with addiction. They don't just deal with drugs, alcohol. They also deal with pornography, codependency, unhealthy, toxic relationships, and all that stuff. Purely from a very Christ-centered, Christ-focused perspective. And it was at this great church called Sanctuary Church down in Colorado Springs. First time I had really attended church in quite a while. But I started going to the Celebrate Recovery. We'd meet on, I think it was Wednesday night. My brother would let me use the car and I would drive to Celebrate Recovery. And we'd have meetings where we would start to talk about our issues and we'd start to talk about our addictions and we'd start to talk about our problems. And so I started to learn what recovery and addiction actually looked like. Meanwhile, I still haven't embraced it all because, like I said, I'm still drinking on occasion and I'm still consuming marijuana on whatever level. We also used to do little projects and stuff like that. That Celebrate Recovery is where I got this shirt. At one of our meetings on a Wednesday night, we had our general meeting and then we broke up and we had this arts and craft project and I made myself this t-shirt. This t-shirt is 9 years old. So that's why it's got holes and it's worn out and it's tattered and torn. But don't think I'm ever going to get rid of this t-shirt because it's such a symbolic piece of who I am and of my journey. One of the thoughts I used to have was, at least I'm not dead. But then I always followed it up with, but is this really what living looks like? I wasn't dead, but I wasn't alive yet either. So remember how I referenced those lies that I had been telling myself earlier on in the episode? Let me give you 3 of them that I believed still, because survival isn't the same as freedom. So the 3 lies. If I change locations, I'll be free. Not true. All that stuff still followed me. Those thoughts, those feelings, those contacts, people still trying to reach out to me from 1,000 miles away. So I was safe, but I wasn't free. Lie number 2. As long as I'm not using, I'm doing fine. So again, like I said, I was not using methamphetamines, but I was still trying to use unhealthy coping mechanisms with alcohol and with weed and with just unhealthy thoughts and pornography and all those things. Lie number 3. If I just stay busy, the past won't catch me. There's some validity to this one. Because if you do stay busy, it does keep some of the stuff at bay, but eventually you will have to face it. So ultimately it is a lie. But healing doesn't come from pretending that you continue to believe and live in those lies. It comes from facing that pit that you ultimately know that you've been living in and letting God actually pull you out of it for good. Last week I mentioned a couple scriptures, Luke 15:17 about the prodigal son, but when he came to himself, that was me then. That happened on the street. And that's what got me onto the bus. But then Psalms 40:1-2 that says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up out of the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. That's where I was now. And this is the much more difficult part. I was out of the place that I was in, but I was still stuck in that pit. And just because I was surviving doesn't mean that I was delivered from those sins, from those addictions. There's a couple of things I want you to take away from this. And that is, one is that you can move your body to a new location. You can change people, places, and things, which is a good place to start. But you can still be stuck in your soul until you face it honestly. It will always follow you. Number 2, recovery is more than just distance from your past. It's alignment to your purpose, but first you have to figure that out. So for me, the real transformation hadn't even started yet. But I really began to feel the weight of the grace that my brother specifically and my dad had extended to me, and the thoughts that kept haunting me about what would happen if I ever went back. Next week, I'm going to tell you another story of grace and how grace can or cannot be accepted. It's the story of a couple that tried to save Danielle, my ex-wife, and how it forced me to ask, have I ever rejected grace in the same way? So if this hits you, share it, message me. I promise you I will get back to you. Or drop a comment if you know that the war doesn't end just because you made it out alive. Make sure to subscribe and follow the channel, because the next part, that's where the real fire starts. And I will talk to you next time, my brothers.
So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.